Aston Martin is most known for beautiful-looking GT cars that occasionally have some rockets being fired out of them. While on the road, you kind of wish they were hit by a rocket because reliability tends to be so awful. But one car successfully transformed its lineage from a GT car to a genuine bona fide sports car. I'm talking about, of course, the Aston Martin Vantage. Let me set the scene. It's the mid-1970s, the oil crisis is coming to an end, and you're at Aston Martin and you want to get the jump on your rivals when making a sports GT car. So they got started right away. They took the name from the 1967 DBS inline-6 variant, the Vantage, and then designed a brand new car from scratch. It looked nothing like a DBS or a DB5 or any other European car from the era because they styled it off a 1970 Mustang. It looks really aggressive and it has the power plant to back up those aggressive looks. Instead of a puny little inline-6, it had a naturally aspirated 5.3-liter V8, making 390 horsepower. It's a proper muscle car in many respects, and I really like it. It looks super aggressive, it's super noisy, it's got that V8 rumble. It's also really fast for 1977. It may look like a brick, but it was called Britain's first supercar, having a top speed of 170 miles an hour and a 0 to 60 of just 5.3 seconds. That is impressive for today. And they later upgraded it to make 430 horsepower, just to make it a little bit faster. However, this is a GT car, so it has to be more than fast. It has to be comfortable with a plush interior, and it even had some convertible designs, because you gotta cruise down the south of France to the Monaco casinos after all. Not that anybody drove the Vantage to a casino, since nobody bought them. Aston Martin built the Vantage for 12 years, and yet only 534 were ever sold. Even James Bond couldn't boost their sales. That's how little people cared about this car, which is a shame, because I think it's brilliant. But it was a brilliant failure, and therefore it was taken out of production in 1989. But the Vantage would be back 4 years later, in 1993, as a high-performance variant of their Virage, although it would later replace it as the only model available. It's complicated, but basically, it went from Virage Vantage to just the Vantage. And it wasn't just a trim level. It was a very different car. There's a reason they made it into its own model, because it basically already was. It had new styling, with only the doors, the roof, and the mirrors being the same as the Virage. The Vantage is also wider and lower, with new suspension and bigger brakes. And then there's the engine. It's another 5.3-liter V8, but now it had not one, but two superchargers to make 550 horsepower and 550 torque in a 90s rear-wheel drive car. That is already insane for the time, but that wasn't enough for those who went to Aston Martin's works service. Those guys tuned up the Vantage into V600 trim, and you guessed it, the V600 makes 600 horsepower and an equal 600 torque. This is at a time when the McLaren F1 only made 618 horsepower. It's an absolute beast. No, it doesn't look quite as good as the original V8 Vantage from the 70s, but it's sort of like a cleaner variant of it. It's very boxy, sort of with that 70s fastback styling, while being incredibly powerful and probably very dangerous, given that traction control wasn't really a thing, and it has almost as much power as a McLaren F1 in a Grand Touring car. And yet, Aston Martin wanted even more. For the 40th anniversary of their 1959 Le Mans win, they released the V8 Vantage Le Mans. The styling was tweaked to look even more like a DBR1, the engine got a teeny bit faster, and the suspension was swapped for Koni shocks. This dropped the 0 to 60 to just 3.9 seconds, with a top speed of 200 miles an hour. The Le Mans was very popular, making up 40 out of the 280 Vantages ever built. Man, the Vantage is just not doing too well for Aston Martin. Considering in the almost 30 years of production, they sold less than 650 of them. Not great. It is because of this financial failure that the Vantage went on a hiatus for another 5 years. But when it came back in 2005, Aston Martin wanted to try something a little bit different. They already had a Grand Touring car in their lineup, the DB9, which was and still is an absolute icon, even without the James Bond stardom. They wanted to make the Vantage into a proper, honed-in sports car. So it had a naturally aspirated 32-valve V8, making 380 horsepower, or half as much, near enough, as the V600. That doesn't seem like an improvement. However, it was a significantly better engineered car. No longer was it just a brick with a massive engine. This V8 was less powerful than its Jaguar sibling, but its dry sump system allowed the engine to be placed lower and farther back in the engine bay. This lowered the center of gravity and getting it closer to 50-50 weight distribution. And it also had a transaxle to help further that distribution. Then the brakes were Brembos, and a 6-speed manual was equipped. No longer was it just a muscle car from the UK, it was a proper, well-handling, brilliant-to-drive sports car that blew away even Aston Martin's expectations. They planned to sell around 3,000, but by 2010 they had finished car number 10,000. Remember when Vantages were selling 500 units or less? Similarly to the Continental and how it saved Bentley, this is one of the cars that saved Aston Martin. It was a masterpiece, and I absolutely love it. It also led to the usual thousands of special editions that don't really mean anything because they're nothing but a coat of paint and some trim. However, there are 3 special editions of this car that I am going to talk about. First up is the most well-known, the V12 Vantage. Aston Martin managed to squeeze the massive 510 horsepower V12 from the DBS into the smaller Vantage. It makes the Vantage a lot heavier, 3,700 pounds, but it's a big V12 in a tiny car, 0 to 64.2 seconds with some clever aero and carbon fiber. It wasn't supposed to be a large production run, but 1,200 were built, and it also served as the basis for our next special edition that we're going to talk about, the GT12. Essentially the 911 GT3 of the Vantage range. Power was up to 600 horsepower, and then they dropped the weight by 300 pounds. Once they did that basic stuff, they added in new aerodynamic elements to make it turn a little better. Although, it should be noted that unlike a GT3, which is honed in and designed purpose-built for a track, because it's a 911 at its core, this is more of a gimmick than an actual track car, because it has a massive V12 engine up front, which does not help the weight distribution or the overall weight. And yeah, it definitely can't go toe-to-toe with the 911 GT3, certainly for the price. So Aston Martin addressed this with the AMR Pro, which is essentially a GT3 car that anyone can drive, provided you're not on the road, so there is that unfortunate caveat. They finally beat the 911 by making it not road legal. But in the end, the Vantage lineup ended in 2018 with the V600, a tribute to the V600 of old that wasn't really anything special compared to the V12 Vantage or the GT12. But this time, that end of production variant only meant the end of the first generation because they made a new one, a new Vantage in 2018. It wasn't quite as British as the old one, since the engine and electronics were from Mercedes, which is kind of hilarious given the Formula 1 situation right now. And the gearbox was from ZF, but you know what? That stuff works really well. And it's better to have a proper working car with that is competent and not British in its reliability sense. The 4-liter twin-turbocharged V8 may be more AMG than 007, but it produces 503 horsepower and 505 torque without giving you an eye-watering repair bill every month. The AMG power gives the Vantage a 0 to 60 of 3.6 seconds and a top speed of 195 miles an hour with perfect 50-50 weight distribution. Not that there was very much weight to distribute since the platform was all aluminum with bodywork that incorporated carbon fiber, dropping the weight down to just 3,400 pounds. Now to make it handle like a proper sports car to complement the new engine and the carbon fiber, Aston Martin gave the Vantage a new electronically controlled differential with torque vectoring at the back. It's a properly set up car and is objectively one of the best cars Aston Martin have ever built. And the 2018 to 2021 model range, I think, looks absolutely stunning. I love the look of that car so much. Reviews have called it grippy, balanced, and supremely fast with a great soundtrack to go with it. So Aston Martin looked at all that praise and gave him even more. You're right, the V12 was back. This time it had the DBS Superleggera's 5.2-liter twin-turbo V12, making 700 horsepower and 550 torque, making it the most powerful Vantage ever built. I won't say it's a particularly elegant car. There's a reason I had that cutoff date for my opinion on the most beautiful car in recent memory. The grille just doesn't do it for me. I'm not a big fan of it. But the fact that it has a big old V12 and a tiny little car in this day and age of electrification is a sight for sore eyes nonetheless. It also serves as a GT12 model in its own sort of way, although an actual GT12 may be coming later down the line as the usual special editions roll through. But this quote-unquote GT12 has new bodywork to produce 400 pounds of downforce at 200 miles an hour in order to keep it stable at such a high speed. It should be noted, however, that the V8 Vantage is still the more nimble version. It might actually be better around a track depending on the length of a straightaway, just because it's 200 pounds lighter with better weight distribution. But I don't care. I loved the old Vantage V12 and I love this one. I may want to tweak the bodywork back to the old 2018 generation, but as a package, it's pretty freaking great. And this refreshed generation of Vantage has done something that Aston Martin hasn't really done since 1959. They went racing. These proper sports cars meant that they could actually have a competent GT car for the first time since the DBR9 almost 2 decades ago. The Vantage is currently Aston Martin's GTE car for the FIA GT Championship. And similar to the DBR9, it's their best car in ages. It won its class at Le Mans twice in 2017 and 2020, beating the new Ford GT, Ferrari 488, and 911 RSR. I mean, in 2020 alone, Aston Martin won the Le Mans GTLM class, the GT-AM class, and the entire championship with 4 total race victories. And while that one title may be the only one it's gotten in his career, the Vantage has won 10 out of the 15 GTLM races it's entered. But my personal favorite racing Vantage is not the GT, it's not any of the V12 cars they may come up with later down the line, it's the ProDrive's Rally GT car. ProDrive has a long and proud motorsport history with partnerships with BMW in the British Touring Car Championship, Ferrari at Le Mans, and Subaru in the WRC. So when they partnered up with Aston Martin to build a Vantage RGT car, it's pretty special. Makes 430 horsepower to the rear wheels as a proper FIA spec rally car. Granted, the 911 GT3 is just better, but the Vantage got its time to shine in the 2006 Race of Champions. And now that there's a new Vantage AMR racer, we'll have to see how one of Aston Martin's most important cars will fare.